Well, hey there, my friend. I am Abby, creator and owner at Abbi Kirsten Collections. I am super excited that you are joining me today for our paper flower Primrose Wreath tutorial. We're going to dive right into the supplies and the Cricut design space setup so that we can go ahead and get right into this craft. The supplies you're going to need for this project is a Cricut machine. You can use any of the current models of Cricut machines, but just take note of the size limitations of the Cricut Joy when you're cutting out these designs. You'll need to have a Cricut mat. You can use the standard grip mat or the light grip mat. You'll need to have cardstock. I like to use 65-pound weighted cardstock, and if you need a good resource, I have links below for you. You may want to have my paper bloom shaping mat and tool set, which is optional, but I'll share more about that in a moment. You'll need to have a high temp hot glue gun for our adhesive. You'll need some form of a wreath base. It can be a grapevine wreath base like I'm using, or a foam wreath base. You'll need some distress ink. This is optional, but it really adds a lot of life to your flowers. And then you'll need to have an ink dauber or an ink blending brush, and you may want to have a Cricut brayer tool on hand as well as a Cricut scraper tool. There is very little you need to know as far as the design space setup goes for this, but in general, you are going to want to download these SVG cut files, which you can find linked below. These are templates of mine that are available to our premium members in the AKC Craft Vault. If you're new to Cricut and you want to know how to upload your SVG file, I have a more in-depth tutorial on that, but essentially you're going to visit this design panel over here to your left-hand side. You're going to click on Upload, and then you'll click Upload Image, and you'll browse your computer or drag and drop the file to bring it in here. So here is mine. I'm going to drag and drop it, and here's our preview. We'll click Upload, and then we'll see it here under Recent Uploads, and we'll click Add to Canvas. Now, once you bring your SVG cut file in, there is really no prep you need to do aside from sizing things to your preference. So you'll notice in my video that I kind of mix up the sizes of the flowers and the sizes of even the leaves a little bit, and there's no exact right way to do this. If you want to stick with similar sizes that I'm using, you can stick to what the file loads as here. But I do recommend that if you decide to scale your primrose flower here and you want it to be a little smaller or a little larger, just make sure you're scaling as a group. So this came in grouped here. You want to come to one of these corners and you want to scale it larger or smaller as a group. That way we don't risk changing the proportions of like the centers to the base petals and all of that. Now with the leaves, you can be a little bit more free. You can come in here and you could duplicate some of these leaves if you want and just create some size variations, maybe by like 1/4 to 1/2 inch size variations, and mix them up. That's all I did in mine. Other than that, just make sure you save your project so you can come back to it at any time. And then go ahead and click on the Make It button when you're ready to start this project. You can use 12 by 12 paper or 8.5 by 11 cardstock. Either is fine. So I tend to use 12 by 12 for this project, but use what you have on hand. Go ahead and click Continue when you're ready to proceed to the next screen, and it'll connect to your Cricut machine. I'm using the Maker here. You can use the Explore models. You can use the Cricut Joy. Just know you're going to only be able to cut out so many petals at once due to the size limitations of the machine. I am using the medium cardstock here setting, but make sure you're matching that according to your cardstock. If you're using something a little bit heavier or a little bit lighter, you may want to explore the light cardstock settings or the heavier cardstock settings. I find the medium weight is best for paper flowers in general though. So let's start assembling this project and getting all of our petals cut out. Okay, so now it's time to go ahead and load our cardstock up onto our mat here. So I'm going to grab my pink here for the flower petals. And you can scale these to different sizes like I mentioned. You can scale them to work on 8.5 by 11 paper if you don't have 12 by 12. So it can be helpful to push your material to the mat with a brayer tool if you find you struggle with getting that material to stick. It's especially helpful if your mat's been used a few times before and you need to make sure that that cardstock is making great contact with that mat below it. Okay, so I've already selected medium cardstock in Cricut Design Space. I have my fine point blade loaded there. I'm going to go ahead and press this double arrow flashing button here because I've already selected the material in Design Space. It's flashing and it's ready to receive the mat. Cricut will scan to make sure you're using the correct mat and that it's long enough for the project. And then once it does, it's going to go ahead and flash the Cricut Play icon, or it might look like a Cricut C icon if you're using the Explore 2 or the original maker. So I'm going to go ahead and press that to proceed with the cut, and we're going to get our flower petals cut out here. Alright, so the cut of our pink paper here is done. I'm going to unload that by pressing that double arrow flashing button to release the mat from our machine. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over, and I want to peel the mat away from the cardstock as much as I can, because that's going to help keep your paper from doing any sort of really crazy deep curling. Same thing when I'm releasing these from the mat. I like to curl back the paper there, or curl back the mat, excuse me. And this is the 12 by 12 cardstock shop paper. This is the smooth, it's really pretty. It's just the right thickness. You do a lot of 65 to 80 pound cardstock for most of them, and they have heavier weights as well. Okay, so here is our Primrose petals. I'm going to set those aside. We're going to cut out the white. We're going to cut out the white centerpiece, the yellow centerpiece, and the leaves next, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and load each of those exactly the same way. I'm selecting medium cardstock, and we're going to get those cut out. Okay, so now we're moving on to making our flower and our leaves before we can start gluing things to our wreath. So I want to just introduce you real quick to one of the tools you're going to see me use here. This is a tool of my own making. You can purchase it through me. There is a link for it below. This is called the Paper Bloom Shaping Mat and Tool Set. I manufactured this about, oh gosh, 3-4 years ago now, at least, and this one has been well loved and used, so it's got glitter all over it, but it is a shaping mat that allows you to add things like veining and ridging to your paper. It helps you curl and cup the paper and all sorts of things like that. So you're going to see me feature this in today's tutorial. If you do not have this or something similar, or do not wish to purchase, I will show you a couple of other things you can do as a substitute. But if you're someone who loves paper flowers like me and paper crafting in general, you may be interested in adding this to your craft tool collection. So it comes with 4 tools here. I'm going to be using just the smallest one here initially. And what we want to do is I'm going to start with the flower. So for our Primrose, you're going to need to have 3 of the slightly larger Primrose cutouts and 2 of the slightly smaller. So what we're going to do here first is I'm just going to start with one on my mat here. And I'm going to start with the smallest ball tool here. What I like to do is I like to add some veining to my petals, because I always say the beauty is in the details, and even though it's something that is a minor detail, when you put all those details together, it really makes the flowers more lifelike. Again, this is optional. I have done it without this, so don't worry, I'll walk you through that as well. But what I'm going to do here is the smallest ball tool, I'm going to take right at the center of the petal here, and I'm just going to start pushing out firmly against this mat with the ball tool. And it's going to create little ridges and lines, and it's going to kind of look like a flower. In nature, they would have those little subtle ridges going through it. And it is harder to see on camera. Up close you can see it, and in person you can see it much more obvious. And so I'm just doing that here. I have made them without this, so if you don't want to do this extra step or don't want to have this tool, then you don't have to. Okay, so that is one done. Let me show you a close-up here. Do you see those little extra ridges that are catching in the light there? You see how that looks? It's really pretty, and it adds a lot of detail. So again, optional, but it is a wonderful detail to add to your flowers. So I would repeat that for all of the petals the same way, and once you do it a couple times, you can really get into it and go relatively quickly. So this is one of the ways that you can use my Paper Blooms shaping mat and tool set, and then I'm going to show you a couple other ways here in just a second. So once you have got the ridges added, if you do that part, you're going to want to curl each of these up. So another way you can use these tools is to curl. So I curl just at the edge there to add a little bit of life with each of those petal points. And you're doing the exact same thing for all of the Primrose petals. Doesn't matter if it's the larger ones or the smaller ones. you're doing exactly the same thing. Okay, another thing you can use these ball tools for, I'm going to go up one size here, is cupping. So I'll add pressure to the center here, and you see how it cupped that up? It really trains that paper to stay in the direction you want it to go, which brings a lot of life to your three-dimensional flowers, right? So I do this a lot. I have peonies that I use this tool a lot with. Okay, so there we go. All right, so that's what you would do for all of them. Now let me just walk you through, if you don't have this tool set, what I would do. You wouldn't be doing the veining or the ridging part here. That would be not done, but you can use a spare glue stick or a pencil or a pen, and you can go around and curl just like this to accomplish a similar effect. And instead of pressing on the mat to cup, you would just gently sort of fold up with your fingers. So you can still accomplish a similar look. It'll just have a few less details to it, but I've made flowers like this for years, so it is definitely possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish setting up these petals, and then we're going to layer and assemble our primrose here. So I am using Distress Oxide in yellow and in green for the leaves, which we will get to in just a moment. And you want to make sure you have some sort of scrap sheet of paper here that you can put on your desk so that you don't ruin the surface, because ink will be getting underneath. So I'm going to take these two white centerpieces here. This is an ink dauber, and this is my Distress ink here. And I'm just going to dab it a few times. And then we're going to come right to the center of one of these, and we're just going to go up and down. And you want this heavily covered in yellow for the primrose. Really, the only white that should remain is the very tips. So you're working from the center out, and really you just want the white tips remaining. So here's it one more time. I'm just gonna dab up and down to where I'm covering almost all of that white except for the very tip. You want to dab heavier in the center and let it get lighter as it goes towards the tip, like it's naturally fading, because the sunlight would fade the tip of the flower. Okay, so this does take a little practice, but you can get it, don't worry. So that is what our centerpieces are going to look like right there, okay? And there's nothing else you need to do for the centerpieces as far as ink goes. It's just those two pieces. While we're here with our ink, I'm going to show you what I would do with my leaves as well, okay? So here is some of our leaves. I have a lighter green and I have a darker green. Now I'm not going to do anything to the darker green because you wouldn't see it because the paper's so dark. But for the lighter green, I'm going to add some Distress ink to this so that it adds some shading, because my goal with the wreath is that these are going to go to the underside, and then the lighter green ones with the Distress ink are going to kind of go on top of it, and it's going to kind of look like it's fading from darker to lighter, just like it would in nature, okay? So that's what we're going to do with these real quick. I'm going to take my green, this is called Lucky Clover, and you can use an ink dauber, or you can use one of these little ink brushers. So I have resources for these on the supply lists. And I'm just going to come in here and kind of go in circular motions. And I like to work from the bottom up, just like that. Or we can see a little bit of it fading into the green there. So do you see how that dark green Distress ink makes it look more realistic as it's fading into the lighter green? So an extra special touch to add to your leaves there. So we're going to start with the 3 largest primrose petals here. And you want to take the first one that's going to be on the bottom, and you want to just sort of slightly flatten it just a little bit, because it's going to work progressively to close. You'll take your next one, you'll add some glue on the back. I'm using hot glue here. And I'm going to place that down, and notice that I am alternating the petal points. So the layer that I just added, its petals are alternating between the 2 that are below it. So that's what you want for that. And you're going to repeat that process with the next one. So I've added the 3 larger ones now, just like that. And then we have the 2 smaller ones remaining. So we're just going to add those in exactly the same way. This is definitely a beginner-friendly flower. And if you're new to paper crafting and paper flowers, be patient with yourself. They do take a little practice, but this is definitely more on the beginner-friendly side. And you can absolutely do it. You might need to give it 1 or 2 to practice before you really get it down, but trust me, you can do it. Okay, I'm adding that last one in there. Just like that. You can fluff it out just a little bit there. There we go. We got just enough room left in there for the center. Okay, so there's our primrose base. Here is our center. We have the 2 white that we did with the yellow distress ink. And then we're gonna also grab 2 of these smaller pieces, which are gonna be layered on top of one another to sort of finish off the center that much more. So I'm gonna start with these 2 first, and I'm just gonna add a tiny dot of glue right to the center of one and place it over, again aiming to sort of alternate those petal points a little bit there. There we go, just like that. And then you can just use your fingers to slightly bend it up just a little bit. Just like that, okay? And then we're gonna take these 2 and basically do exactly the same thing. So if you do have the shaping mat and tool set, oops, glue strings. If you do have the shaping mat and tool set, you can bring that back into the picture if you like here and kind of roll the center to get those little centers to stand up a bit. But again, this is optional. You can just bend them up with your fingers like I showed you with the primrose. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and glue these in to each other. A little hot glue here. And place that on just like that. And then we're gonna glue this final center in here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there is the center of our primrose. All that's left is to add it into the primrose flower to complete your flower. Just like that. So there is your primrose flower complete. If you do not plan to put these on a wreath, perhaps you want to stem them, I do have another tutorial on that. I'm going to link it below for you, just for those of you who maybe want to use these in a different way. To take our greenery and we want to shape it a little. There's a couple different ways you can do this. You can again use that paper bloom shaping mat and tool set and come in here. I like to flip it distress side down, and I'll add a little bit of veining and ridging. Kind of like that, and then I'll curl it or use the side of it to curl the tips down a little, and we're adding some life to it. And now we have something that isn't so flat, so you could do something like that. Another option for you is just to use, again, like that glue stick and sort of just add some curl to the petals or to the leaves. Kind of like that, so that's another option. Additionally, you can also use your Cricut scraper tool if you have that on hand, and you can come in here and sort of curl like that. So some different options for you there on how you can do that, whatever you're most comfortable with or whatever you like the look of the most. I usually kind of do a variety or whatever's closest by at that moment. So that's what you're gonna do for your leaves. You just don't want them to be perfectly flat. You want them to have a little bit of shape to them. All right, so the time has come to go ahead and start adding our greenery to our wreath. So like I said, I'm gonna be taking the dark green first, and then we'll be adding the paler green with the dark green distressing over it, and the flowers will be the last thing we go on. So I'm just going to start placing these on at random using my hot glue. Now there is no exact science to this. Nature blooms all different directions, so don't be afraid to go kind of up, down, to the side. Decide how much coverage you would like. Do you want it more just on the top? Do you want it kind of going down the sides more? If you want more coverage, of course, that'll be more leaves to cut out. So I like to take the bigger pieces first, the bigger cuts that I made, and I like to get those kind of positioned randomly first. If you're not using one of these grapevine wreath bases here, you can of course use like one of those foam wreath floral bases as well. You may just need to cover it in something first, like some either crepe paper or some ribbon, and just wrap it so that you can't see the foam peeking through, okay? It's just something to keep in mind if you go with a different approach, but definitely still possible. All right, so here's what I've got so far. I'm gonna start adding all of the lighter green now on top of this darker green base. And with these, I'm gonna work to kind of tuck them a little bit more strategically among the darker green. Again, I like to work with the larger pieces first. Now, as your wreath gets fuller with your leaves, you may want to work some of the other leaves kind of more down and around on like the edges of the circle of the wreath, and we'll just make it look a little bit more well-rounded. So that's what I'm going to focus on with the rest of these pieces here. All right, so all of my greenery has been added on. You can see how pretty it looks, especially since we took the time to add two different colors of green with our paper and then add that distress ink on. It really makes it look more lifelike. So now we just need to add on our primrose. So this is ultimately up to you. You know, do you want to style it so that maybe you just have like a cluster of 3 to the side, maybe 2 clusters of 3, or they can be evenly dispersed around the wreath? I think I'm gonna opt to evenly disperse them because I kind of want to go for that look in general. I'm gonna see how it looks first. Okay, so this is what I'm going for here. It's a very loose positioning of it, and I'm gonna start gluing these down. So I'm gonna take this one here. Now, when you glue this down, the area that you're gonna glue it, you might wanna give it just a light press and flatten that little area of leaves just so it's a little bit easier to push the flower to when you add the hot glue on the back. So I'm just gonna add some hot glue right to the back. Give it a little press. You can even use your tool to sort of just press right in the center where it's gonna make good contact with the glue. And I recommend, because you're putting it on top of all of these like leaves here, you might wanna hold it for a good 10 to 15 seconds per flower. That way you know that that hot glue has a chance to really grab and it's not gonna just fall off on you. All right, so here's a look at our finished primrose wreath here. This is all made from cardstock paper. I think this turned out really lovely, and you can absolutely personalize this with colors of your choice, your style. You can make them larger, you can make them smaller. So this is just a lot of fun. Make sure you grab these templates below, and I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it helped you feel more comfortable working with paper with your Cricut machine and making paper flowers. I have loads of paper flowers on AbbiKirstenCollections.com. You can find more information about that linked below, and I hope to see you there. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.